time, and anybody who knows me might have heard me say this, art has been really important for human beings. They found cave paintings that were made like 30,000 years ago, and like a flute that was 40,000 years old. And the thing you have to think about is that human beings, Neanderthals, whatever, did not figure out how to grow food until 12,000 years ago. So 18,000 years before they figured out how to feed themselves, they were making art. So for some reason, for us, for all of us, this is really important. And whether or not, you know, like your career, whatever your career is, it's really important to make stuff, to think about making stuff, to perform stuff, to go see art, to doodle, to garden, to knit, anything, including, you know, playing your instruments. But the creative process is really important to us as human beings. And if we let it go, we're going to have trouble. So they also show that kids, like little kids who do group art projects, who sing in choirs, who make group sculptures, who do theater, who are in orchestras, grow up having better conflict resolution skills. So not only do art, but do stuff with other people that's creative. Like put down your phone, go paint graffiti. I don't know, but do something. And it's in all forms. It's not just about classical music. It's about performance art. It's about anything. It's anything that's creative, that's not mercenary. So also the cool thing about music is that you can do it till you're really old. Like Casals was like 96 and still playing. So unlike sports and other things where you have to have quick, you know, like race car drivers, music is really good that way. Out of curiosity, how many of you do stuff other than music? Paint or theater or be bold? Let me see. Good, good, very good. Those, I mean, and the other thing I was curious about is how many of you are bilingual? Again, bigger hands, because great. I'm bilingual. I grew up not speaking English. There is, I think, a connection between how we learn music and how we learn languages. So there's a thing there. There is a book about creativity by Elizabeth Gilbert, the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She's kind of, but the book is called Big Magic, and it's got a lot of really cool statistics in it. So if you ever, okay, so basically I'm going to talk about practicing. And for full disclosure, I still struggle with practicing. I hate practicing. I hate going to the gym. I hate it. It's a struggle for me every day. It's like, has anybody seen the movie 50 First Dates? Right? That's what it's like for me to practice. It's like every day I'm like, oh God, you? Who are you? I have to do it. So, and the other thing that comes along with that, and I don't know if do any of you know what the imposter syndrome is? Yes? Okay, be bold again. Do you know what it is? The imposter syndrome says you walk into a room and you feel like a fraud. You feel like this thing that you've been doing, suddenly you're just not good enough. Even though you studied it and you're doing the best you can, you feel like, we have to get away from that, because if your voice is saying, I don't believe you can do it, then you're not going to work hard enough to do it as well as you could. So it's, again, something that you'd struggle with, I struggle with. My first job was in Italy, and I was hired, and the contract was in Italian, and I was hired to sit second chair. And when I got there, I sat in the back of the section because I was 23. These were all a bunch of old men. And finally, the orchestra manager came up and said, no, you have to sit there. And I was like, I can't sit there. I learned a lot from that experience because I thought, okay, fine. I'm just going to have to pretend that I'm not an imposter. And to a certain extent, that is what we have to do. We have to pretend that we have a uniform on, that suddenly everybody respects us because we have this uniform on. But in fact, everybody has the same feelings inside. You just have to go and step and have conviction. have conviction. That being, I am doing my best. And part of that is you can't keep score. You can't think, well, so-and-so is doing it better than I am. All you can do is compare yourself to yourself. A big part of how I feel about being a musician is like, we're athletes. And in my race, I can't go any faster. And maybe you can go faster, but that doesn't mean that I suck. I haven't had like training on what's appropriate to say or not to say, so I hope I don't say the wrong thing here. But you can't keep score. You can't compare yourself to someone else. All you can do is compare yourself to what you did yesterday. And that's your best, then that's your best. You have to have the conviction that you are doing your best. By the way, I got some questions, and I'm going to get to those at the end. Interestingly, for me, some of my best practicing has been when I did not have a deadline. I find the same thing is true for exercise. Sometimes I am much more committed to exercise when I'm on vacation. And I think what that says is, in our daily lives, we're too scheduled, we're too pressured, we have too many things on our list, and we rebel. And also, there's a little bit of, in the fear of failure, and the fear of, like if you've got a concert coming up, it's like if you're running a race. If you've got this goal that you're working for, and you procrastinate and you don't do it, partly that's you're self-sabotaging because you don't think you're good enough. Part of it is that we just need to get into a habit, and I'll talk about that later. So, why do we do music? Why did we choose to do music? And for me, I went to college, I went to Cornell as an economics major. And after my first year, I told my parents I wanted to do music. And they said, right, get your degree. So I got my degree and then I went to music school. And what I thought at that moment was, I don't want to be middle-aged and wonder what if. This is really the only thing I like doing. It's the only thing I want to do. I really want to do it. And so I went to music school, and it was what I wanted, and I worked hard. I was very lucky. But if you're going to choose to go into music, it has to be because it's the thing you love. There has to be something in you that says, I'm obsessive about this. I just really want to do this. I don't want to do anything else. I don't, And there's an interesting article recently in the Times about passion. There's two kinds of passion. There's a passion that comes from within, and it's because you love the craft, because you just love doing it. So I have a passion for animation. I love making little animated movies, stop motion animation. I draw and I paint, and I've got little Lego guys, and I love doing it. There's no purpose, but I love doing it. That's a passion that is love of the craft. The other kind of passion is love of recognition. I want to publish this book because I got great reviews on my last book, and that kind of passion you have to be a little careful of because it comes from the outside rather than the inside. I know that when I was young, my passion was driven in part by fear of my parents. My parents were paying for college if I didn't get good grades. And I think, so I have a son who's 28, and when I told him I was talking about this, and he said, some of that is cultural. And for instance, in my family, it was culture, and it is the way it is. And he says it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, that you're driven by what your parents want. At a certain point, though, if you're going to be a musician, it's got to be your life. It's got to be what you love doing, because it's a really hard life. It's a really, it's a lot of work, and it's like you always have homework. It's like you never have finished your homework because there's always something else you can practice and work on. So it has to be really driven by you, and it's got to be the only thing you want to do, and you've got to have a severe commitment to it. I lately have been interested in the concept of meditation, mindfulness. And I think mindfulness can help us tap into that commitment and help us develop new habits to practice better, more efficiently, more regularly. And the idea of mindfulness, has gotten sort of a very precious rap. What I think about it is it's the ability, and I had to write this down because this is a quote from a guy named Dan Harris who wrote 10% Happier. You guys know this book? No. Okay, so I'm going to give Megan a list of stuff, a list of links, websites, stuff that has made an impact on me. And you guys can peruse it at your will or not at all, but there's a bunch of stuff that really have just made me start thinking about what we do, why we do it, and how we get it done. So mindfulness is the ability to see what's going on in your head at any given moment so that you don't get carried away by it. For instance, you think you've had a hard day, so you're going to eat the whole roll of Girl Scout cookies, right? And at the time it seems like it's reasonable, but you've gotten hijacked by your brain because it's really not a good idea. So mindfulness allows you to observe that moment and not react to it. It's, I wrote this down in a different piece of paper here. Mindfulness allows you to respond wisely rather than react impulsively. That's a really important concept in terms of getting anything done, not engaging with people who divert your time, not engaging in activities that waste your time the next day. So, and sometimes, going back to, sometimes we regret the things we don't do. So, it's not just about stopping yourself from doing something you shouldn't. It's also about taking the risk to do something which could be really what you want. So mindfulness is like a muscle you can strengthen in your brain. If you practice the idea, so just to sit still, I sit still in the morning, and sometimes it's 1 minute. There's only 3 things you need. You need to sit still, you need to try and relax and observe some physical sensation in your body. So it can be your breath, it can be how your butt feels on the chair, it can be how your shoulders are moving. Just observing something physical, and then watching when your mind starts to wander, observing that, and very kindly and in a friendly manner saying, I'm thinking, let's get back to watching that thing, that breath, that butt, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the thing about mindfulness is that it's not the quiet part that we're practicing. It's the observing the distraction and the ability to come back. And this will help you in your practicing, because sometimes when you're practicing you get bored and you don't practice well, and you don't pay attention. And I will also say the idea of observing yourself in a friendly way, the way you would your friend. So if your friend is sitting with you and she's fidgeting, you don't say, hey, jerk, cut it out, like you do to yourself sometimes. You speak sometimes very unkindly to yourself. Your brain is wired to avoid things that are unpleasant. So if you start talking to yourself in an unpleasant way, your brain is not going to keep observing those things that you need to fix. Your brain is just going to say, and how many of you know that you get to a point where you stop listening to how you're practicing? You've actually learned something out of tune, or you've learned it with a bad note in it because for some reason you've stopped listening to yourself. So the idea of being kind to yourself is really important. Like, I also think that the idea of being kind to yourself will help you practice more regularly because we don't want to practice. So anything you can do to make it a more friendly activity is better. So one of the questions was, how do you learn something that's really hard and you don't have a lot of time? My advice is, as soon as you get to music, look at it. Because you need to stick it in your brain somewhere. You need to have it imprint on your brain and percolate in there. Because if you procrastinate, and I have a great video about procrastination, by the way. If you procrastinate, you'll get to it too late. What we do is physical. It's muscle memory. Like an athlete, we can't cram. If an athlete has a race in 3 weeks, they can't suddenly start working out the day before. We can't. And that's us. And I think a lot of us think, I don't really have a lot of time today. I'll start tomorrow when I have an hour and a half, and then tomorrow something else will happen. Way better to spend 10 minutes and look at your piece really slowly and just really caveman kind of looking at it. Just look at it and stick it in there a little bit so that it's reinforced later. So practice early. Just practice early. And what I wrote here is practice early and slowly and often. So the slow part, again, is about muscle memory. And the image I like to give is a little baby. How many of you seen a little baby go up and down stairs? Right? They measure the whole step, and it takes them forever. You guys are in your 20s, maybe late, whatever. You guys can go up and down the stairs in the dark, drunk. And it's because you've done it 10,000 times, right? And we don't have to do things 10,000 times, but the baby starts out measuring. And the baby does it enough times that it becomes a muscle memory. We know where the step is, we know how it goes. So the thing about practicing is practice it slowly, like that kid. Look at the finger patterns. Are all of you string players? Okay, so look at the finger patterns. This is the Vulcan finger pattern, right? Right? That one is hard, but look at the finger patterns. Look at them slowly. Imprint them in your brain, really, really slowly. It'll help you later. Slow practice. Okay. So the other thing is, the benefit of practicing the first time really slowly is that you don't learn a mistake. If you sight read your music and you go over it quickly and you play a wrong note, that wrong note has imprinted on your brain. And the image I like to give of this is, let's say you're on a hike. And on your hike, you come to a really large grassy knoll, a big grassy hill. It's got long grass in it. And you have to get from here to there. And there's this hill in the way, so you can't see where you're going to end up. And what you do is you end up walking through the long grass like this, like that, right? And you tamp the grass down. Well, what happens is that the next bunch of people who come to that spot will take the curvy path. And in this metaphor, the people are thought patterns. So your thought pattern wants to go where it went before. So it's way better that the first time you practice the right notes and the right rhythm, because then it'll stick in. Okay, so the hardest part is just to start. So even when you don't feel like practicing, even doing 5 minutes is better. It's like, again, going to the gym, just walking in the gym helps, just making a habit. I have a thing about making habits. Habits are really hard to change and really hard to make, and the process of making habits is different for everybody. Also, if you found a way that helps you make a habit today, that same method may not help you in 5 years. So you have to keep on trying to get yourself to do the thing that you want to do. You have to decide why it is you want to do it, and then you'll get into the habit. I mean, most of you brush your teeth every morning? Yes? Yes. Yes, most of you brush your teeth. That's a habit, right? It's just a habit. They say it takes 3 weeks to create a habit. So for 3 weeks, you really have to force yourself, and then you're just used to it, but you have to keep it going. So I have this theory that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get it perfect today. In math, there's this thing called the theory of limits. You have two axes, right? And as y approaches 0, this goes to infinity. So, as this one approaches infinity, that approaches 0. And the idea is, what's easy easier to think is, let's say I walk from here halfway to the door, and then I walk halfway again. Am I actually ever going to reach the door? No. And it's the same thing with practicing. So today when I'm practicing, maybe I only get halfway there. I get it, and it's slow, and I can't get it any faster. That's okay. Tomorrow I'll get another halfway there. And I keep going towards it, even though maybe it's never going to be perfect. This is the same thing as in sports. I like the image of a weightlifter. Do any of you lift weights? Wait, how many of you work out physically? Excellent. All of you should be working out. The life of a musician is really hard on your body. You do a very unilateral thing. It's very asymmetrical. You only use part of your body, and you can get really hurt because of overuse. It's really important to exercise your entire body. But weightlifting. So let's say I have signed up for a competition, a weightlifting competition. I've got to deadlift 200 pounds in 6 months. Today I can maybe do 30, right? So I'm, working on the weights, and I do 30 every day this week. I do 35 next week. I get to a point in about 3 months where I'm at 120 and I fail. I just can't even lift it. So I try, and I give up. I'm like, okay, today it's not happening. Tomorrow, because I tried, I'm successful. And it's the same thing with practicing. You have a really tough passage, you work at it slowly, you keep working. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, it's not happening today. It's muscle memory. Your muscles need to figure it out, and sometimes it just takes longer. So the idea of progressive practicing is really the way it goes, and you have to think of yourself as an athlete. You can't cram. So here's the opposite of what I'm saying is binging. How many of you binge watch things? Okay? Why do we do that? It's not like it's going to expire. It's not like you're going to miss an episode. It's not like you couldn't just watch an episode a day while you're on the treadmill, but instead we get sucked into it. And I don't have an answer for that. I really don't have an answer for it, except that maybe there's something else you don't want to do, and that you just get sucked into it. But the thing about practicing is you have to get to the point where you're just doing a little bit every day, and you're not putting it off. So binge watching is sort of doing it all at the beginning. And that idea of binge watching or binging anything is something to watch out for, because again, when you're mindful, your body says, I really want to binge something. And when you're mindful, you are not hijacked by that. You're like, wow, I'm going to feel really lousy tomorrow if I do that. Do you have a question?
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think the binge watching thing comes from wanting instant gratification.
Yes.
Kind of just wanting to know what happens very quickly.
Yes.
And that definitely happens with practicing too. Sometimes you're like, oh, I want to learn this today, because you only have a certain amount of time to learn something, and then you can't do it, so then you kind of just give up.
Well, so I feel like it's two sides of the same coin. Exactly. I feel like they are related. And I really feel like the idea of learning something today is impossible. It happens over time, and it happens over a long period of time. And so you have to then that's why, to me, the idea of being mindful of how you're behaving about everything helps with getting yourself to do the thing that you want to or that you shouldn't. Yes?
With the mindfulness, when you're practicing and kind of the kindness thing, how do you, because you can objectively say oh, I really messed that up, or oh, that really was not good, which is not particularly kind, so how do you make swaps, and what do you swap them for?
Okay, so I pretend that I'm talking to a friend of mine that's having a really hard time learning something. What would I say to her? I would say, it seems like you're having trouble with this spot. What can we do to get through it easier? Can we go slower? So I was talking to a colleague this morning who was talking, because he also is reading this book that I just read. He's like, okay, so I was just meditating this morning, and my mind started going, and I'm like, no, you're just stupid. And I'm like, no, Mark, you can't do that. You have to say, observe it. Observe it in a neutral way. So, that's not going well. Not, you messed it up, you're doing it that way. That's not going well. And then you think, how can we make it go well? And most of the time with practicing, if you play it really slow, you'll get through it. So I always back things up slow enough so that I can get through it without making a mistake. And if that's less than half tempo, that's fine, because I'm still grooving it here and here. So, okay, so a couple specific things about practicing. So finger relationships. Things you can do to make things go better is practice without the bow. Check where you are. So put your fingers down, practice, and then put your bow up and listen. It also helps to look at your music without the instrument. Like if you're on the train, I know that none of you have a lot of time. Nobody does. So looking at the music, but looking at the music as soon as you get it is like the key. Sometimes if you've got a hard passage in a piece, memorize it. Also shifting, if you've got a tough shift, shifting forward and backwards. And then there's paying attention to how you listen. So that idea that sometimes we get to a point where we're practicing but we stop listening. The way to get yourself to listen is to pretend that your teacher is behind you, or pretend that Yasha Heifetz is behind you, or Joshua Bell, or Edgar Myers, or somebody. Somebody who you really admire, just pretend that they're behind you, or pretend you're in your lesson. I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but you practice something at home and you think you have it great. You get to your lesson and suddenly it's not so great. And that's because when you're home, you're not listening. So, okay, so how many of you are left-handed? I want to see really high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 25 out of 30. On a string instrument, which hand is more important? Somebody guess. Your right hand. Somebody guess, but loudly.
Left. Right.
Left. And why?
Because it's doing worse.
Okay. You agree or you don't agree?
I say right hand.
And why?
Because it's what controls your bow and even though your fingers are like creating the notes, the bow creates like mostly like the dynamics and the expression and like the real sound.
Okay. There is no wrong answer. I'll tell you my opinion. And my opinion is that over time, the string instrument family developed in a way, most people on earth are right-handed. And when we have difficult tasks to do, they come to the right hand. We don't write with our left hands. People who are right-handed are not made to write with their left hands because our left hand, our right-handed majority left hand does not work as well. So the tasks in life that we have to do, pitching, writing, I don't know, all kinds of things, chopping stuff, we put in the right hand. So when things developed, when the instrument developed, the more difficult task was put in the right hand. This is my theory. Never really read it anywhere, but it seems like it makes sense. And I think that the left hand is very important, but I think that the right hand is like the voice, the breath. And I think that without a really nice right hand, you could have a kick-ass left hand, sorry for the language. You could have an amazing left hand, and if your right hand was clumsy, it wouldn't come out. So it's not to say you should practice one at the expense of the other, but it does mean that you should pay a lot of attention to how you practice your bow. So when you start to practice, Pick a scale, pick anything. What I do is I do long, slow notes. And in the long, slow notes, I listen to bow changes so that there isn't a crunch at the end of, it's like, right? You don't have a crunch, so you listen to that. And also, I play with my vibrato. So to me, if you listen to the string players who I admire, they have beautiful vibrato. Yes, they have beautiful bow, but they also have beautiful vibrato. And their vibrato allows them to be expressive in many different ways. So fast vibrato, it conveys anxiety or anticipation. And a slow vibrato could be love. And you think about that and you think, okay, how many emotions can I portray with my vibrato? This is the kind of thing you practice when you're on vacation and you don't have a deadline. Miscellany, pizzicatos. In an orchestra, everyone always plays pizzicatos too soon. And my rule of thumb is, I've got a pizzicato coming, I look at it, I wait, and then I wait a little longer until I can't wait any longer, and then I play it. And it always has to line up with somebody, but we're always early. When you're practicing a hard passage in a piece of music, always practice a couple bars before and a couple bars after. Otherwise, what happens in practice, in the orchestra or in quartets or anything, is that while you can play the hard passage bars, you get rattled because the passage before you didn't do the lead-in. Also, look at hard passages at the top of the page. And use your metronome. Okay, so now I have your questions. And this went way faster than I expected, but so the first question I had was, what do you find is most helpful for you when memorizing several large pieces of repertoire for a recital? Everybody's, I don't know whose question that was, it doesn't matter. Everybody's memory is different. Everybody memorizes things differently. For most of us, memorization happens with repetition. And it happens best over time. So there are piano pieces that I played when I was 10 that I still know because I did them so much. I played piano the way you guys probably play video games. And my mother didn't stop me. I love the piano. But, so when you have to memorize something, as soon as you get the music, start listening to it, because you can imprint it in your subliminal memory, and start working on it right away. I tend to memorize things measure by measure. So Yo-Yo Ma talks about this, that you would start with one measure, memorize that measure, then do the next measure. Problem with that method is that you have more repetitions at the beginning of the piece than you do at the end. So if you're going to do that kind of way of memorizing, like I prefer to do one phrase at a time, but always remember that you don't always start at the beginning of the piece. Otherwise, you know the beginning of the piece really well and not the end. So as you're memorizing, memorize here, then start here, but it's really, it's just repetition. So when I practice, I put the metronome at half tempo, and I have 10 things on my stand. When the kids were little, I used to have Lego pieces. I had 10 pennies. Now it's a glass Mancala piece. I go over the passage at 60 and move one over, and I do it 10 times. And then I boost the metronome up one notch, and I do it another 10 times. And by the time I've gotten up to tempo, I've done it 120 times. That's the way you memorize. That's the way I memorize. Some people have a photographic memory, so that memorization isn't a problem, but that's not for most of us. And the way you know things securely is with lots of repetition. I think about the opera singers on stage. They start 4 years beforehand. I have a friend who says, you have to spend at least 1 year for a concerto. Just start practicing a year beforehand. I don't know how much time you guys get for your recital that you have to memorize, but whatever it is, start as soon as you can. And I don't know, is it a requirement that they do things from memory?
To a point, because it varies. I have a lot of contradictory feelings about memorization because some people have a very easy time and some people don't. And I feel that if you don't have an easy time memorizing, then when people go to perform, they're more worried about the memory than they are about the actual music. And I'd rather hear a beautiful musical performance. The reason I like memory is because it enables people who have an easy time memorizing to be able to be freer in their playing. Because I've also seen people, you know, with their eyes glued into the music, you know, like reading the music off the page. And frankly, if you use the music, you shouldn't really need it. It should just be there as sort of a,
Right.
you know, if there's a little spot here and there that you
Sort
feel
of like this.
insecure about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think a lot of places, just to finish it, I think that a lot of schools, I know a lot of the conservatories want you to play everything from memory. And I think it depends on a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
But see, I have a different take on memory because I think that if you're singing it, what I always do, I have an easy time memorizing, I should say, so it's not really fair. But I take the music to bed with me, and I read the music and I sing it to myself. I look at the notes. I don't necessarily have a photographic mind, but I can see the notes when I close my eyes, pretty much, not all the time. But I also hear it, because I find if I'm singing the whole thing through, when I'm practicing, it's like I'm practicing passages. So, and eventually putting it together, but it's sort of like an assembly of all the hard places. When I'm just reading it, it's what you were saying before, when I'm reading the music without the instrument, I'm reading the whole thing through.
I have a tough time memorizing, and I am extremely, when I get nervous, so I've played concertos with music, and I have no shame in it. If it is a requirement for your program, another thing is to make sure that when you start practicing, you are focused. Because one of the reasons that I can, for instance, I played a concerto, and I saw that there was a photographer in the box, and I had a beautiful dress, and I thought, I gotta get him to give me a picture of me in the dress. And I messed up. I totally messed up, and I had the music. So the idea is when you're practicing, do not get distracted. Focus, pay attention, and that's also where mindfulness will help you, because when your voice, because we all have this voice in our head. What's for lunch? Oh, I shouldn't have dropped that thing yesterday. We all have that. So if you can manage to quiet that voice when you start practicing, you'll take in the music and you're going to study better. So this one, the next question, is that good? Does anybody have any other thoughts about this? This one was a great question. How do you convince your stand partner to work together with you? So, you know, this is really tough because this can fall under the category of bullying. And the thing about bullying is that it's very subtle. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. It can fall into the category of bullying. It can also not. So the two things that make sitting with someone else work best is if you come to rehearsal, performance, knowing that you're doing your best, knowing that you can't have learned better, that you didn't procrastinate, knowing that you know the music as well as you can. That's number one, that you have the conviction and the commitment and the confidence that you're playing well. The other thing is to make sure that between the two of you, you're comfortable, because you can start getting really aggravated at someone else for something that actually isn't his fault. There is limited space on the orchestra stage. So do your best to find a way that you can sit and not become uncomfortable, because if you're uncomfortable, people start getting a little irritated. I have had a situation where I've been bullied where, and the problem for me with bullying is that I don't want to ask for help from, so I know that there's protocol about bullying in the school, and there is at work, and you can go to HR and they will take care of it for you. The problem with bullying is that it actually doesn't fall into any category of illegal behavior. It is not illegal. It's not unethical for your stand partner to come in and not say hello to you. It feels kind of shitty. Sorry, again, I don't know if that's, I'm not sorry, but it feels kind of lousy that someone who you're about to sit with for the next 3 hours doesn't say hello and doesn't talk to you. It feels really lousy. And it also feels really lousy when they kind of play in your face and they play in a way, and I don't know if this is the question, but clearly it has touched something in me. And it will be something that you will face in your lives. The best way that I have found to deal with difficult situations, in all kinds of ways, is to imagine that it's not personal. To imagine that the other person actually had a fight with his wife that morning, and it has nothing to do with you. He's just a little bit, or she, whatever. And the best metaphor I have for this is this. I go out in my little boat in the bay one morning. I'm rowing, it's a sunny day, it's a great feeling, I feel amazing. From the dock, a boat gets loose, and the wind pushes that boat, and it rams my boat in the middle. So I've got like a big hole in my boat. So nobody's at fault. I'm just thinking, okay, I gotta get my boat fixed. I gotta get my boat fixed, okay. The next scenario is same thing. I'm in my boat, I'm having a great day, and it's all great. Somebody comes in his boat, and he aims for my boat, and he hits my boat, and I have a hole in my boat. Now, the fact is, it's the same result. I am left with a boat that I need to fix. I can put all kinds of extra energy into wondering why that happened, wondering what he did, why he's mad, why he hit me, or I can leave it and I can think, it just happened and I need to fix my boat. So I cannot make it about him, I can keep it about me. And to me, that's a useful way of looking at all kinds of things. Yes, he might have done it on purpose. He might not have done it on purpose. He might have had a headache and couldn't see because of the sun, and it was totally accidental. We don't know, it actually doesn't matter. So when you're in a situation where it's difficult with your stand partner, whether the stand partner is not doing the same bowing as you are, or the stand partner is not prepared or something, whatever it is, it's not about you. So find yourself a comfortable spot, make sure they're comfortable, make sure the stand is good, do your best, stay in your little boat.
I have something definitely to say about this.
Okay.
Having experienced this over and over again. I think what happens when somebody isn't doing a good job, and you're sitting with that person, is you feel somehow personally responsible to help that person do a better job. That's the nicest way of putting it. Particularly when it's music that you love, and you feel like this person either hasn't practiced, or has an attitude because he or she doesn't like where he's sitting, or they're sitting behind you and they wish they sat in front of you, or they don't understand why you're sitting on the outside and they're not. There's all sorts of dumb stuff that goes on. The thing that I always get angry at that, and then I have to remind myself that I can't be judgmental of anyone but myself. And I can only do what I can do, because what you're saying is so true. You're not going to change anyone's mind, and they're either going to calm down in a half an hour and be a little friendlier, or they're not. But that took me a lot of years to get to.
And it is not my responsibility to teach the other person if they're not prepared. But it's also not, it is a waste of my energy to be frustrated with that. I can just come and I do my best. And if you don't, it is my choice to let you ruin my experience, right? And that, it's just like all of that is a waste of my energy. And I don't have that much energy. So I'd rather spend my energy doing my thing really well. And if you're not gonna do it well, or if you're gonna be mean, whatever, it's your problem. It's not mine, I'm in my boat. I mean, that's really, so,
There's one other thing I want to say, because you're all going to come into the business and you're all going to be the youngest people in a section at some point in your lives. And I think that that's a whole, I think we ought to talk about that briefly, because I think that there's a certain number of people who love to mentor younger people, and that's most of them. And then there are some who are very resentful. I'm going to tell you my story of my first job. My first job, when I was 18, was at Radio City. When I was still a violinist, I was hired to do the Christmas show for 3 weeks, and they put me next to this old witch who nobody wanted to sit next to. And I was sitting on the inside, so I was supposed to turn pages. I go to turn the page, and she leans forward, she turns the page like, and over again. She did everything in her power to be as hostile to me as she could possibly be, to the point where at the end of this rehearsal, I was having a hard time holding back tears. And then of course some of the other guys came later on and they said to me, well, you know, she's a witch, which didn't really help me at all. And I still felt sort of terrible about it. But you know, you're going to encounter all of that sometime in your life where people are going to resent your being there just because you're young and they're not. And I think that you have to develop this, you know, this attitude of just doing exactly what you're hired to do.
right, the courage of your convictions, and know that you're doing your best.
And that you've been
that
hired
you're
because you're good.
Right, that you're good, right? It's like you have to know that you're good. And that's where that imposter syndrome can, if you're not convinced that you're good, people will find that and make you feel like an imposter. But I mean, that will happen, and it still happens. It still happens to me. I've been at the Met for 32 years, and I have a colleague who's been there for significantly longer, and she still makes like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, but part of that also is incumbent on us not to take on other people's bad juju. It's like, you know? Did you like that?
Yeah.
I'm ready. Anything else on that topic? Getting along with others? Okay. I'm a really weak sight reader. What are some strategies that you've used to master sight reading? Really, sight reading is just hours behind the wheel. Take out a book of orchestra excerpts, take out orchestra parts, play along with a record, a CD, whatever, for music. It helps if you play along with music that's going, because often when we sight read, we stop, and you can't. When you're sight reading in a group, they're not gonna wait for you. Like, I don't know how many of you have had this, you're playing quartets with somebody and you get lost, they keep going and you're like, but, and you don't wanna say that, so you're like, where are we? So, but sight reading is just practice. The more you do it, and again, some people are just better at it. But, take Bach sonatas, read them. That's like, take etude books, read them. Just read a lot of stuff. Any other thoughts on this?
I have a thought on it.
Yep.
I think what happens is, a lot of times when we know scales, we play them from memory. One of the great things in terms of reading music is to make sure that you're reading your scales and arpeggios, because the sight reading involves a different skill. You know, aside from, there's two things. So that's the first thing, is to make sure that you're reading music for a good part of the time. The other thing is what Desiree was talking about, is not letting the rhythm go. You know, keep going along no matter what. Because that's how.
Don't falter, don't stop,
Yeah.
don't hesitate, don't do over, you gotta keep going.
And don't look back.
Yeah, yes?
What if you get, like, last time you called to an orchestra and you gotta go in, and you don't have time to know the music your best, and you gotta sit in the section and do that? Like, how do you, what do you go for?
Okay, so it depends how little time you have. I'm sort of in this position. I'm the 5th violist, and I'm sitting on the first stand for all of the Wagner's operas this season. Because we're short a player, and at the last moment somebody got sick. You do your best. Also, I can't stress this enough. The idea of being calm. I think there's a a scene in one of the Matrix movies where he's seeing a bullet come at him and he slows it down with his mind. Am I right about this? That's the essence of mindfulness, which is to observe the panic in your head and not be hijacked by it. Because what happens is that you get in there, or let's say you get the call, and we've all had this happen, or by the time you're older. You get a call, and it's 10 o'clock at night to come into an 11 o'clock rehearsal of whatever. So you do your best. You look at the music, you listen to it, and what I always do is whatever symphony it is, it's an hour to listen to it. So listen to it and look at the part. You can usually find the part on Petrucci, right? You guys know, right? Okay. So you can usually see the part. And this is a good way to practice for orchestra anyway. Listen to it, look and mark the spot that's really hard. Get that part. Look at it, because you'll see how it goes. And also, if you've listened to it, I mean, if you have to listen to an entire opera before the thing, it's not going to happen. So just leaf through it, get to wherever you're going early, but stay calm, because you'll be able to handle the passage better if you're not also got this freak out chatter in your head. If you're like, okay, it's going to be okay, and even if it's not okay, I can get through it. This is an aside. When my kids were little, I had a colleague. We got a new. I used to come in and say, "Oh my God, I'm really sorry I didn't practice. I'm not. Of course, I was always like fine, but I never felt like I was good enough." And finally, this person said, "Look, when you apologize, you're calling attention to the fact that you're not prepared. Number one. Number two, had you said nothing, I might not have noticed. You might have done totally fine. So try and have a confident aspect to yourself. Tell yourself it's going to be fine. And I'm going to do the best I can. At this moment, right now, even if I should have been practicing for the last 20 years, at this moment, right now, I can't do any better than I can. And what I can do is pretty awesome because I'm really good." So tell yourself that. You know, and it is still like sports. If you tell yourself, I ran the race and I came in 5th in the Olympics, right? If you tell yourself that, you're going to feel bad. But if you tell yourself, I ran as fast as I could, I can't run any faster, you're going to feel better. Any other? About, what was this? This was about, about if you get called at the last minute. All right, here's another one. How do you go about practicing a difficult work that you have to perform in a short period of time? Start early, listen, find the essential parts. Really find the essential parts. And practice slowly. But start early. Really, I can't stress this enough. Like, we can't crayon. Like, you know, if you think about a downhill skier, or if you think about a swimmer, there is no way, if they're going to have something to do in 2 months, 1 month, 2 weeks, that they don't start working right now because their muscles have to do it. What we do is physical. So whenever you have something to learn, start right away. Start right away. Start the minute you get the music. Even if you don't feel like practicing, listen to it. Just find the music, watch your part go by and listen to it, because that'll help you. That'll imprint it in your brain. So I let things get into my head way too easily and make little things like counting easy rhythms become mission impossible. This is two things. This is about staying calm and focused, but it's also about telling yourself you suck. This says making little things like easy rhythms become mission impossible. So I tell myself, I've got this viola thing. I can't do complicated rhythms, and I always mess up. Now, is that actually true? No. But when I say it, I mess it up. So like Dakhnani, right? The slow movement of the Dakhnani trio, where there's no beat, right? da 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 dee, right? They're just playing, they're playing, I can't even sing it to you now, I'm freaking out. If you freak out about it, you're gonna make it worse. So when you have difficult rhythm, and this is also like sight reading, the more you look at complicated rhythms, the more you look at pieces of music where it goes da 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 da, and then 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, right? The more you look at stuff like that, the more you're like, oh, I can do that. I've done stuff that's harder. I've done stuff, But again, try not to tell yourself I can't do easy things, because we can. When we tell ourselves we can't, we predict it. We make ourselves feel bad about easy things. Another question. How do I know if going into music is the right thing for me? So you have to love it. You have to love it. You have to want to do it. And I have a feeling that all of you are here, so there should be no waffling. This is the time in your life to commit to doing something you love. And we don't always love doing the thing we love, right? Right? We don't always love it. It's like a love-hate thing. But there's nothing else that you want. And the way I knew, by the way, that I wanted to go into music is that when I was at Cornell, I had a lot of, I looked at my transcript, I took like 19 credits a semester, and the only classes that I went home and did my homework for were my music classes. Music theory, composition. Those are the classes I went home right away, and I'm like, really, I'm like interested in this. And I had this feeling like to choose something to do in your life that doesn't feel like work is too easy. It should feel like, statistics and, difficult things. And in fact, it's not true. You have to love the thing you want to do. Not to say that it won't work out, but the hard work that you put in here will make you able to do anything in your life. So don't waffle. Love your music and work hard. Is there anything specific you do to get over nerves during an audition? Yes. I read a horrible quote, which I'm going to give you, even though I think it's horrible. There is no such thing as nerves, there's just being underprepared. I think it's awfully harsh, because I think people do